Welcome to the deep dive. You sent us some really intriguing material on the unexplained, and we're going to unpack the key insights for you today.
And today, it's all about Whitley Strieber. A huge name, obviously.
Absolutely. Anyone interested in this field knows communion.
Definitely. That book was massive. 6 months on the New York Times bestseller list, which is just incredible. And it struck such a chord, with people feeling they'd had these bizarre experiences, but were totally alone.
Yeah, it gave him a voice, didn't it? And we're also drawing from his other work, The Fourth Mind. That one goes deep into, well, alien biology, their minds.
Anatomy, consciousness, the whole package.
Exactly. So our mission here is to really get into Strieber's experiences, his insights about contact, drawing mainly from a recent interview he did.
Okay, so where do we start his personal journey, I guess? That initial shock.
Right. He was hit with just profound disbelief and, frankly, terror.
Pure terror. He had that line, didn't he? I wish I lived in a prison.
Yeah. It just perfectly captures that feeling, like the floor just vanished beneath him, the sheer fear of the unknown.
Utterly world-shattering for him.
But then, from that really dark place, he decided, okay, I have to face this. He chose to go for it.
Which led him down the path of hypnotic regression, trying to make sense of these buried memories for communion.
And that's where Dr. Donald Klein comes in.
Yeah, important context there. Klein wasn't just anybody. Head of New York State Psychiatry, a respected forensic hypnotist.
So his involvement carried weight.
A lot of weight. Apparently, when Klein confirmed Strieber's experiences seemed genuine under hypnosis, it caused some ripples. There was even talk the New York Times killed a story because of it.
Really shows the kind of resistance this topic faced, doesn't it? Even then.
Oh, absolutely. And it taps into what Strieber calls the ontological shock.
Explain that a bit.
Well, it's the shock, particularly for intellectuals, for scientists, of confronting something that just fundamentally challenges our place in the universe. Strieber himself, came from an intellectual background.
Right. And suddenly he's faced the reality where humans might not be at the top of the food chain, so to speak. It completely destabilizes your worldview.
A deeply uncomfortable idea for many, which leads to the big question.
Yeah.
What do they want? What are their motives?
Strieber kind of lays out this duality. Are they looking for companionship, some kind of connection? Or is it something darker, like what he calls soul slaves?
Soul slaves. That sounds pretty ominous.
It does. His idea is, well, if you deny your own soul its existence, you basically leave yourself open. You could potentially be taken over, controlled on that level.
That's a heavy thought. It makes me think of that really weird story from Stapleton Airport.
Oh, the baggage claim incident. Yeah, that one's strange even by these standards.
He sees this figure, described as a ridiculously disguised gray, and this huge little boy playing patty cake in an airport.
And then the boy just disappears.
Oh.
Vanishes into thin air.
Right. And Strieber connects that back, doesn't he, to an earlier encounter. He does. He'd met this tall woman and man before, and apparently he just blurted out this request to see one of their children. Totally unexpected.
So he thinks the airport thing was a response?
Kind of. Like a demonstration of trust, maybe? Acknowledging his earlier request in this very, very strange way. Like, okay, you asked. Here you go.
It suggests a level of interaction, of awareness, that's just so far outside our normal experience.
Absolutely. And that ties into the huge technological gap Strieber always emphasizes.
Yeah, the difference between us and them technologically.
He uses this powerful analogy comparing it to, say, European colonization.
Yeah.
The sheer impact of advanced technology.
Right.
And he sees our attempts to, summon UFOs with tech, or even psionics.
Yeah.
He calls it a cargo cult mentality.
Like the islanders building wooden planes hoping real ones would land.
Exactly. Like the Skywatcher groups trying to call them down. Strieber's view is pretty blunt. Their technology is so far beyond us, it might as well be magic. We can't even really grasp it.
Which makes trying to replicate it seem kind of pointless from his perspective.
Pretty much. And he thinks this tech gap is made even worse because we are, in his words, a soul-blind society.
Soul-blind? What does he mean by that?
He argues that our modern culture, especially the scientific and intellectual parts, is so focused on the material world that we've become blind to the non-physical aspects of ourselves,
No.
our souls, our consciousness, what he sometimes calls the second body.
And this blindness is a barrier.
A huge barrier, he thinks. It stops us from having any kind of meaningful engagement with these visitors. We can't understand their motives. Maybe we can't even properly perceive them. If we're denying that whole dimension of reality exists, it could even make us vulnerable.
So if we don't understand that part of ourselves,
Yeah.
how can we possibly understand beings who might operate primarily on that level?
Exactly. Okay, so let's shift to their actual appearance, their biology based on his accounts, and that interesting Reddit document he included in The Fourth Mind.
Right. First thing,
Mm-hmm.
they don't talk like we do.
No. Primarily telepathic communication. That's consistent. He even talks about spellers.
Spellers.
Humans who are apparently unvoiced but can communicate telepathically. He describes meeting one in Mexico.
What happened?
He said they communicated visually, sharing images of dogs back and forth, and weirdly, the images triggered really specific childhood memories for Strieber.
Wow. So direct mind-to-mind visual exchange, bypassing language completely.
Yeah, makes you realize how limited words can be sometimes.
Definitely. The Reddit doc also mentioned infrasound, right? Sound below our hearing range.
It did, and that connects with what Charles Hall reported about the tall whites he allegedly encountered.
Strieber had an experience with that too, didn't he?
Yeah, he described hearing this incredibly high-pitched sound, and then immediately after, he heard or perceived a question in his mind. What can we do to help you?
Suggesting communication on frequencies we just don't normally pick up.
Could be. Maybe multiple channels at once, telepathy, maybe infrasound.
It opens up a whole different way of thinking about communication.
Yeah.
What about their physical makeup? Lungs like birds.
Lung sacs like birds, yeah, and a diaphragm that can make humming sounds. That's mentioned.
And their hearing is different too.
Apparently so. The cochlea, the inner ear part, is shaped differently. This could let them hear a much wider spectrum, possibly including that infrasound we just talked about.
Okay, so it all kind of fits together. Telepathy, infrasound hearing. What else? The waste excretion is unusual.
Yeah, that's a weird one. Both Straber's own observation and the Reddit document mention they excrete waste through their skin pores.
Leaving an ammonia-like smell.
Apparently. Strieber even recounts being surprised by seeing evidence of this in his own yard after getting some kind of telepathic message explaining it was a cleansing process.
Definitely not like us. What about their skin itself?
Described as very smooth, no creases, like ageless in a way.
Which links to that story about the old lady figure.
Right. He asked her, "Are you old?" And she just replied, "I'm old."
Which makes you wonder, what does old even mean to a being like that? Is their experience of time totally different?
You have to assume so. And touching them, their hands specifically, is often described as feeling disturbing.
Yeah, I remember reading that. And the Reddit doc mentioned their fingerprints.
Concentric circles. Not loops and whorls like ours, just another little alien detail.
And the eyes. The big black eyes are iconic, partly thanks to the communion cover. But there's often mention of a covering.
A film or a veil, yeah. Straber thinks maybe it's to soften the intensity. He describes looking into their eyes as seeing their whole being.
Overwhelming, maybe?
Possibly. His friend Steve Neal apparently saw them once without the covering, suggesting it's removable or perhaps situational.
Seeing the whole being, that connects to his idea of the fourth mind, doesn't it?
It does, and he's very clear it's not a hive mind like, the Borg or insects.
So what is it then?
It's more complex. An interconnected consciousness, he says, but with levels, maybe even internal contradictions like our own minds have, just scaled up massively.
So when you look in their eyes, you're not seeing an individual in our sense, but tapping into that whole collective.
That's the idea. You're perceiving the interconnected whole. It's a really mind-bending concept.
Totally. So if they have this vast collective mind, this immense knowledge, what could they possibly fear?
That's a fascinating question Strieber explores. Maybe the sheer weight of all that knowledge, maybe a unique kind of loneliness, even within the collective.
Loneliness in a crowd, but on a cosmic scale?
Kind of. And maybe, surprisingly, they fear the lack of surprise, the difficulty of experiencing something genuinely new.
Because they know so much.
Perhaps. Strieber described this fleeting moment where he felt like he saw reality as they might.
And what was that like?
He said it felt like riding on rails, like the future was already laid out, no real sense of agency or possibility, sort of bleak almost.
Wow. That's heavy. He contrasts that with Jeff Criddle's experience, right? His co-author.
Yeah, Krill felt like he was pulled out of the stream of time.
And that scared him.
Terrified him. He
Mm.
apparently yelled, "Oh my God." Strieber thinks maybe they see value in our linear moment-to-moment experience of time, something they might not have in the same way.
So even with all their advancement, there's something about our human experience they might recognize or even value.
It seems possible, which leads to their view of us, of voiced species.
What's their take?
They see our creativity, apparently, stemming from our individuality, our separateness.
But they also see the downside.
Yeah, our tendency towards self-destruction. But interestingly, Strieber says they don't want to colonize us culturally. They don't want us to just become copies of them,
Why not?
because then we'd lose what makes us unique, our specific value. They seem to appreciate the difference, even with all our flaws.
That's actually quite hopeful, isn't it? That difference is valued.
It is. And this connects to what Strieber thinks their goal might be, this apotheosis or critical mass for humanity.
What are they aiming for, in his view?
He thinks they're trying to guide us towards becoming truly self-aware, but crucially, while staying in the stream of time.
How would that work?
It involves a shift in perspective, seeing ourselves not just as separate egos, but as instruments, as parts of a larger conscious reality, and shifting our main focus, our attention, to that bigger picture.
Sounds like a major evolutionary step, almost spiritual.
Very much so, and love plays a key role here.
How so?
Strieber often quotes his late wife, Anne. Her definition of enlightenment was, "What happens when there is nothing left of us but love?"
Beautiful.
But he stresses this isn't just sentimentality. It's about an objective, fundamental love, the force that he believes actually holds the universe together.
A cosmic glue, almost. Okay, what about individual expression for them? If they have this unified mind, do they have art, music, like we do?
Strieber's a bit unsure about that. He thinks maybe the need for individual expression is less when you're that interconnected.
Makes sense.
But he doesn't rule it out. He even wonders if interacting with humans might foster new kinds of expression in them. He mentioned they seem to enjoy his poetry, for instance.
Huh. So maybe the interaction benefits them too, sparks something new?
Possibly. Now, a more controversial topic. Hybrids.
Right. Does Strimmer think they exist?
He's quite firm on that, yes. He thinks they do. He even speculates about links to things like Klinefelter syndrome.
That's the genetic condition.
Yeah, extra X chromosome in males. He wonders if that could relate to some hybrids being non-vocal, telepathic, maybe exhibiting traits we'd call autistic. He even claims he saw some using mind control to steal things from a shop.
That's a pretty wild claim. Is there any proof? Physical evidence?
Well, that's the tricky part, isn't it? Strieber says proof is hard to come by because they're telepathic and seem to want to stay hidden. But then he talks about his own implant.
The ear implant from 1989. That's a central part of his story.
Absolutely. He describes these two individuals looking human, showing up at his isolated cabin late at night.
Despite alarms and locks.
Yeah, a tall bearded man, a shorter woman, both in dark blue clothes. He felt paralyzed, felt something being inserted in his left ear. The alarm didn't go off, and later they found a weird magnetic field near a door.
And the implant itself. Did he get it checked out?
Years later, yes. A doctor tried to remove it surgically. Strieber says the object literally moved under the skin, avoided the instruments, like it was alive or intelligently controlled.
That's incredible. And he also mentioned something about his eye.
Yes, after his wife Anne passed away, he says this slit appeared in his left eye. He now sees it as some kind of tool, something that helps him access deep memories, insights. Research tool, he called it.
It's an extraordinary narrative. Does he link his implant experience to others?
He does draw parallels with Dr. Roger Lear's work.
Lear removed alleged implants from people, right?
Yes, and Lear found these small objects, often metallic, were frequently encased in the person's own skin cells, but deep within muscle tissue.
Which is biologically weird.
Very weird, like the body was told to coat it to prevent rejection. Strieber notes implants have been reported elsewhere too, like the nasal cavity.
It really builds this complex, sometimes disturbing picture.
Yeah.
Does Straber differentiate between the types of beings involved?
He does. He talks mainly about the grays, both short and tall forms, and also the tall whites. And then there was that one encounter with a Nordic type.
The Nordic gave him a warning, didn't he?
A very stark warning. Never get into a war with the grays because they'll never let you win and they will never let you stop fighting.
Chilling. What did the Nordic look like?
Green eyes, blonde, about Strieber's height. And he apparently said very clearly, "I am not of you," doubling the you for emphasis, maybe.
Making a clear distinction. So, Multiple players on the board, potentially.
Seems so. And he also hints at possible connections to government programs or even breakaway civilizations.
Like sequel projects working with ETs.
Yeah, he mentions talking to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and he brings up the idea of off-the-books bases, massive black budgets in the Pentagon, echoing researchers like Richard Dolan who talk about a hidden human civilization with advanced tech. Where does all that missing Pentagon money go, he asks.
Raises huge questions about secrecy and what might really be going on behind the scenes. Okay, let's turn to some listener questions now. People wanted Strieber's take. First one. If you could go back to one past event as an invisible observer, what would it be?
His answer was immediate. The first big abduction experience in 1985.
Why that one?
To see it objectively, to check how accurate his memory really is, because, however vivid it feels, memory's tricky, especially with trauma and high strangeness. He also, sort of humorously, wanted to see if his reaction was as comically terrified as it felt to him.
A very understandable desire for clarity.
Okay.
Okay, next question was about C5 protocols, people trying to initiate contact. Should they do it?
Strieber doesn't say don't do it, but he warns against what he calls orb tourism.
Meaning?
Meaning just wanting to see a light in the sky isn't the point. Seeing something, if it happens, is just the beginning. The real question is, then what?
So it's an invitation, not an end goal.
Exactly. An invitation to engage more deeply, maybe change your life. But he sees a lot of people just get stuck on the phenomenon itself, the sighting, and they don't know what to do next.
Does he have specific advice for people actively doing C5 work, like Jake Barber's team who asked?
He does. His main advice is master your attention.
How so?
He thinks our focused attention acts like a signature they can recognize. If your mind is scattered, it's like you're not being clear or respectful. So offer your attention willingly, carefully, maybe even lovingly, but keep a part of yourself anchored. Don't just get lost in it.
Okay.
And the next step, he believes, is learning to access parts of yourself beyond the everyday ego and express your attention from that deeper place that signals you're trying to meet them on their level, kind of.
So it's really about inner work first.
Absolutely. Self-knowledge, inner peace, recognizing the soul, that's crucial. It's not about just wanting a spectacle.
That really shifts the focus inward. Final listener question.
Thanks.
What's the single most important piece of wisdom from all these experiences that you'd want to pass on?
For this, he shared something profound from his wife, Anne.
What was it?
She told him, "The human species is too young to have beliefs. What we need are good questions."
Wow.
And Strieber really ran with that. He urges future generations, go out and ask the big questions. Ask them inwards about yourself. Ask them outwards about the universe, about each other. And ask them of these intelligences if you get the chance. He believes that's the path, persistent, honest questioning. That's where real understanding starts.
That's, incredibly profound. Forget easy answers, seek the right questions. This whole deep dive into Whitley Strieber really drives home that need for questioning, doesn't it? This ongoing quest to figure out our place.
It really does. And huge thanks are due to Whitley Strieber for being so open, sharing these experiences and the insights he's wrestled with for decades.
Absolutely. And for you listening, we hope this gives you plenty to think about consciousness, communication beyond words, what human evolution might even mean.
And maybe we can leave you with one last piece of Anne Strieber's wisdom that Whitley shared. Have joy.
Not just happiness.
No, she specified joy, something deeper, more constant. Have joy.